Welcome back to the wrap. KG, how you doing?
Doing all right, man. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. Kind of fall's starting and kids are back in school, but relevant to this discussion, what that means is not just vest season, but also budget season.
There you go.
And so a lot of the conversations we're having with our clients right now is, obviously they're budgeting for new initiatives. A lot of people looking at, hey, where can we make AI investments? But the foundational pieces of, reviewing old spend and kind of incumbent services is still massively important. So thought what we could talk about a little bit today is, kind of how to how to assess an IT budget, specifically external services, right? Vendors and services. With the goal of looking for where's their low hanging fruit, where is their opportunity, and kind of the span of this conversation, really, kind of the desired end state would be, where should we spend more time, right? I think kind of need to be able to, and one of the things that we do in our engagements is go in and kind of quickly determine, hey, where does it make sense to spend some more time and dive in and understand, like, is this a spend bucket that can be impacted? And so I think that's kind of topical with the season, something that we're uniquely great at, and hopefully a good conversation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the some of the opening thoughts on where do you start um, is you can't think of it in a vacuum, right? Like I think all too often you get, you know, the I don't know what you'd call them, but the hack and slash folks, where they want to go in and all they see is is the ones and zeros, but with the dollar sign versus the actual technology ones and zeros,
Yeah, yeah.
and I don't think that is the most prudent course of action. I think you got to think about these things as I think when we discussed a little bit more of like a Venn diagram or these kind of interconnected pieces, and typically when you're talking about your technology, there's kind of these three legs of a stool, if you will, where it's your security, your architecture, and your cost. And these things are yes, we want to look at them both independently, but also like together or through the lens of each other. That if something is secure, is it architected? And if those two things are true, it's architected right, it's secure, then I should be paying the right amount for it. And so those are kind of a litmus test of each other.
Yeah, it's a unique affecting IT spend is kind of unique because of that, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not, you can't just look at the cost and you can't just go negotiate with vendors. You can't just switch something over. Like, it all has to happen inside the context of this architecture and security, and getting the right components of that, right? Because you can absolutely have things over engineered. You can absolutely be spending too much for things. You could even, don't don't kill me for this one. You could be too secure, right?
Yeah.
In a way that's either impacting end users or just doesn't make sense for the investment that's occurring versus the risk that's kind of being retired. And so finding that sweet spot, for a little bit of a Goldilocks type of thing, with the center of that Venn diagram. So I think it's an important call out. First, we're going to be talking about cost today, right? We're going to be talking about looking at it, but it this is really a collaborative discussion, typically between technology leaders and subject matter experts from the security perspective and from the infrastructure or engineering perspective. So I think it's a really good call out. For us, when we go in on our engagements, the very first thing we're doing is we're building a baseline inventory, right? And so, at a high level, what that is it is normalizing the spend, right? At a minimum, you kind of have to get a workspace. And when I think about a workspace, I mean, I'm talking about a digital workspace in this place, but a collection of, you know, some high level reporting about the spend. Could be your IT budget, could be GL code, could be by GL code and looking back over the last year, could be vendor reports, could be a lot of different things, but you have to start somewhere where you get it all in one space, because these things, they're very, very closely related, right? If you just look at through through a lens at a specific vendor without understanding the other vendors around them or the things that are interacting with them, like you're really going to be left chasing your tail. So the first thing we do in our engagements is we build this baseline inventory, which is basically normalizing all of the spend across vendors. You know, at a minimum, this is some form of a spreadsheet that is, the vendor, the spend, whether monthly or annually, the sites or users or business units that spend is being delivered to, and the function that it is providing to the business. Ideally, you would then also have some level of, you know, hyperlink or organization so that you can go dive into the details of the invoice or of the contract. Ideally, both. All right, so that's kind of where we start for this, and where I tend to advise, even if somebody's going to try to do this on their own, they have to start somewhere like that.
Yeah. Well, and I think the adjacent piece is a really important call out. And a practical, even kind of small example of that is, company goes in and says, "Hey, I want to increase my network, right? I want to up all my network speeds." And so what they do is they go and they replace all their circuits, but what they didn't take into account was all of the equipment at the edge. Their switches, their firewalls, their router, like all some of these other components, and maybe that's actually where the choke point is. And so, cool, you dropped a 1 gig circuit, but if the throughput on that hard piece of hardware is 100 megs or whatever, then you upgraded that for no reason, right? Because you actually have a downrange or downriver effect that choke points it. And so I think those are important to understand. Again, not looking at things in a vacuum, but being able to see a broader context of how do these things interchange with other technologies, other pieces of the business, and what's the second and third order effect.
Yeah, as basic as it sounds, look, it starts with data collection, and it is more companies than not that we go into. There ends up needing to be some level of extensive data collection, right? Like it's not very, very few companies that we go into say, "Yep, here's all my spend," and it's in a way that we can sit down with it, right? I mean, what we do after we get that data collection and build that baseline inventory is we spend time familiarizing ourselves with it, right? I mean, literally, people on the team are blocking off their calendar, sitting down kind of in this workspace, in this digital workspace, and diving in, by site, by vendor, by service, understanding how these pieces engage with each other, and building, what we would call an RFI list, right? A request for information. What, when you run down and you do kind of a by site cut, and you see, hey, there's 4 circuits at this location. All right. Okay. Well, we're going to note that, and we're going to go and ask, either the office manager at that, the IT manager, whoever, hey, what is the purpose of all these circuits? There may be a legitimate business purpose, right?
Yep.
But you don't know that, and so kind of an important kind of next step after that baseline inventory is question everything. I know you're uniquely great at this. The resident, what do you get called sometimes here?
Chief skeptic officer, the
Yeah,
CSO.
yeah, the CFO, yeah, Chief,
CSO.
CSO, yeah,
Yeah.
Chief Skeptic Officer around here. But yeah, I mean, what's kind of the come from there? I mean, obviously, it's something where you kind of try to find line, right? Because you need to collaborate effectively with people, but also like you got to have a lot of curiosity.
Yeah. So I almost look at this similar to like a zero-based budgeting approach, but with technology. And you certainly can't do this every time, right? I mean, because it is a very kind of in-depth process. And so, you may run at what would be more of like a cost plus type of thing over time, but then every once in a while it's like, hey, we need to do more of a full review. And so what that would look like, instead of saying this is our, watermark, what deviation from the watermark should we make? But you've assumed a certain watermark. And I think that's a faster way to do it, if you need to kind of increment. But every once in a while, whether that's annually, semi-annually, it kind of depends on your business. You need to question that watermark. And so then it's basically say like, hey, let's empty the pool, and we need to justify putting every piece back in and reaffirm those assumptions, or, the pieces where we've always assumed that, we needed this technology. And it's like, well, maybe that was true. And that was true for 10 years of our business. But this year something changed, and all of a sudden the thing that everybody has just been kind of this mantra of believing is true is no longer true. So there's a real value in doing that kind of approach where you start to question everything, and justify putting each piece back in the box. And you'll find that, like, again, all of a sudden 30% or sometimes more of things don't need to go back inside the box, or at the very least you've identified that, yeah, we may put this back in the box for now, but we've identified it as a target for some type of change initiative
Yeah.
because you know we need a different set of requirements that this thing is now in question. So it's a great exercise for companies. It's part of what we help them do. And again, I think on that baseline, we're working with people to say, let's document document the assumptions of what do you believe your environment looks like, how do you think it's architected, and then all of a sudden we start looking through that, and it's like, they say I've got a backup circuit at every site. Well, do they have a backup circuit at every site? Or I moved all of my users to this hosted voice solution. It's like, okay, well, I see tens of thousands of dollars worth of SIP trunks. Like, what's with that, right? So you can start
Yeah.
to easily identify some of those things.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that, what we tend to do kind of after those things are identified, it's almost like a heat map, right? You're then looking and you're basically grading and prioritizing, right? And so you're very likely going to find more than one thing, right? If this is an IT estate of any size,
Yep.
you're going to find multiple things. The reality is, I have yet. I keep saying this. I've been saying this for years now, and maybe this will be the year that I'm surprised. But I have yet to see an IT team that is overstaffed, right, or over resourced,
Yep.
and so that continues to be the case. And in an under resourced or understaffed environment, what that means is that you have to prioritize, right? And so once you kind of get this, call it heat map, right? Hey, we think we maybe have something in our network. We think we have something in where we need to look at FinOps in our cloud environment, whatever the case may be, right? We needed to do security tool rationalization, right? We discovered we've ended up with way more vendors than we expected, likely some overlapping stuff, right? We think we have something there. You then basically need to grade and prioritize those opportunities. You really have to start with the grading, and what you're grading in there is basically what is the size of the opportunity, right? What is the spend bucket that we're looking at, you know, as a percent of the overall spend, right? Obviously, something that impacts 30% of the spend, um, you know, very likely going to be more important and should be higher graded than something that impacts 10% of the spend. However, that's kind of only one domain, right? Is the percentage of the spend. Some of the other ones are difficulty to achieve, right? And that can be there's a lot of subsets to that on the difficulty to achieve. I know you've had some thoughts there. Maybe you want to share.
Yeah, well, and I think one of the ones I would maybe add, and I don't have maybe a great way to articulate it, but I want to throw it out there is call it lock-in or
Yeah.
you know ability to change over time, right? Because what you may find is um, low hanging fruit, which sometimes that's more what I would call like paper changes. The way in which you're procuring something, you're on a month to month. If you do a 3-year contract, you're going to get typically get some type of price concession. If you do an annual prepay, you may get some type of price concession. Like there's ways that you can do without changing any of the technology itself. Easy wins, but what you may find is that, okay, so those things may have gotten me 5-10% savings, but they may lock me in for 3 years. A different project where we actually go and do some type of call it more of like a re-architecture of changing out a technology or changing out a vendor, obviously harder to achieve than just signing a piece of paper. But if that achieves 20 or 30% savings, but takes a little bit longer, well, now those are hard conversations, right? Those are conversations you got to bring back to the business, because sometimes, you have the IT folks that are getting, demanded, hey, go cut 10% of your budget, and I need it this month, or I need it this fiscal quarter, or this fiscal year, and you got to bring that back to the business and say, hey, yes, I can, I can go make this paper change, but that kind of locks us in, or I maybe take this little bit longer approach, but get a lot more out of it, both from a price perspective as well as maybe a solution, that the solution itself is better architected, more secure, and more cost effective.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that difficulty to achieve, I mean, it's going to depend on every company, right? Like what capabilities do you have in house? I mean, some of the things you just talked about, for instance, kind of refactoring something, right, which is likely going to lead to higher savings, maybe better performance, some other things. You also have the capabilities to do it, right? Do
Yeah.
you have the know-how and the capability in the team? Um, you know, can can the IT team effectively manage the technology on the other side of any change? Are we going to have to change the resources that we have here, either get more or retrain or certify or, do things like that? And so I think that's a really kind of important component of the grading and prioritizing, right? I tend to think about it on, I'm a simple guy, right? Like I tend to think in kind of four quadrant type of thing, right? Like, what is the size of the opportunity and what is our ability to get it? Those things that are large opportunities with an easy ability, that's a high grade, right? We want to really spend our time and energy focused on those things. Those things that are harder to achieve, even if they're sizable, like it just depends on what's going on in our business and how much transformation we're looking to conduct at this time.
Yeah.
And so that grading and prioritizing exercises is massively important because ultimately the rest of this is kind of a thought exercise if you don't do that last one and then connect it to the execution. All right. And so you got to get focused.
Yeah, and you definitely. I mean, recognizing the realities on the ground is a huge piece to what you're saying, right? And you could achieve 100% savings, right, or something crazy. But if what it requires is something that you're as a business just aren't capable of in that moment, it doesn't really do you any good. To and if you're not going to make the changes, I think that's the other part, right? Is there's there's that conversation of, hey, we aren't in a position today right now based off of our, whatever it is, our capabilities, our position in the market, whatever, to take advantage of this, what we see as potentially a really large go get. um, Now if we're not going to change the realities on the ground, then that excludes that thing, and we should go focus on the lower ones that are actually attainable.
Yeah.
But the business may say, okay, well, look, that's actually a large enough go get that we want to affect the realities on the ground. Maybe we'll go higher, maybe we'll go partner, maybe we'll do something. But you can't have that conversation in a real way until you've acknowledged
Yeah.
what those realities are of where you're at as a business, where your team has, where your team is and their capabilities, and what you're
Well,
actually
and the upside of the change, right? And the
yeah.
upside of the change, right? Like it's to go just request back to the business, hey, I need more resources for this, but without telling them what you're going to return to them, that's a conversation that's dead on the vine,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, I think you're spot on here. Look, I would be remiss if I didn't wrap us up here with uh, a little bit of a plug, right? This is the work we do all day, every day. You know, I believe we're one of the best in the world at it. In our specific domain. If this is something that as a listener, you're at a company that needs to do this type of exercise, this is the work we do. Um, it's important work, it's necessary work, and we're some of the best in the world at it. So, hopefully, if you're a do-it-yourself type of person, hopefully you kind of got some direction from listening to this. If you need a partner in it, that's what we exist for, and we're here to support. So, with that, that's a wrap. Gotzman, thanks for sharing your knowledge, and we'll see you on the next one.